An assassination plot targeting Burkina Faso's leader Ibrahim Traoré is now unravelling beyond its borders, with a former president accused of being the mastermind of the attack has been arrested and extradited from Togo.
They tried to kill Ibrahim Traoré at midnight on January 3rd, and by 1 in the morning, thousands of Burkinabés were flooding the streets of Ouagadougou, ready to defend him with their lives. Let me tell you what happened here, because this story exposes how desperate some people are to stop what's happening in Burkina Faso. On January 6, 2026, Burkina Faso's security minister, Mahamadou walked onto national television late at night and told the country that intelligence services had just stopped the 23rd assassination attempt against President Ibrahim Traoré since he took power in September 2022. This wasn't vague speculation or political theatre. Sana said they had intercepted recorded conversations between conspirators discussing the exact plan, which was scheduled to begin 1 hour before midnight on January 3rd. The operation was supposed to start with assassinating Traoré, either by shooting him at point-blank range or by planting explosives at his residence. After killing him, the plotters planned to destroy Burkina Faso's drone base to cripple the military's ability to respond. Then, according to Sana, foreign forces were supposed to invade and take control of the country. The security services caught the conspirators in the final hours before execution, arrested multiple people, and stopped the entire operation before it could start. But here's the part that should make you pause. This wasn't some random group of disgruntled soldiers or opportunistic rebels. Sana named the mastermind publicly, Paul-Henri Santiago Damiba, Burkina Faso's former military leader who was overthrown by Traoré in September 2022 and has been living in exile in Togo ever since. Sana said Damiba orchestrated the plot from Lomé, recruited operatives inside Burkina Faso, and received funding from Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso's southern neighbor. 70 million CFA francs, roughly $115,000, was allegedly sent as the most recent payment to finance the operation. And just 11 days later, on January 17th, Togo arrested Damiba and extradited him to Burkina Faso to face criminal charges. That extradition is what makes this story explosive, because it proves that the accusations weren't just propaganda. If Togo was willing to hand over a former head of state who had been living under their protection for over 2 years, that means they believed Burkina Faso had credible evidence. Togo's Ministry of Justice said they approved the extradition based on assurances from Burkina Faso that Damiba would receive a fair trial, that his physical integrity would be protected, and that he would not face the death penalty. But extraditing him at all is a massive statement. So let me walk you through who these people are and why this matters, because Ibrahim Traoré has become one of the most polarizing figures in Africa. To his supporters, he's a revolutionary leader in the mold of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's Marxist president, who was assassinated in 1987. Sankara is a hero across Africa for standing up to France, rejecting foreign debt, and trying to build a self-reliant Burkina Faso that didn't answer to Western powers. Traoré channels that same energy. He wears a red beret like Sankara did. He talks openly about anti-imperialism and Pan-Africanism, and he's taken concrete actions that infuriate the West, like expelling French troops, nationalizing gold mines, and forming the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger to build an alternative to Western-backed regional organizations. To his critics, Traoré is an authoritarian who seized power illegally, has postponed elections indefinitely, cracked down on press freedom, and is using nationalism to justify military rule. Both things can be true at the same time. Traoré is popular, genuinely popular, especially among young Africans who are tired of seeing their countries controlled by foreign powers. But he's also running a military dictatorship that doesn't tolerate dissent and has committed serious human rights abuses in its fight against jihadist groups. And that's where Damiba comes in. Damiba was the guy Traoré overthrew. In January 2022, Damiba led a coup that toppled Burkina Faso's elected president, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. The coup was popular at the time because people were furious that Kabore couldn't stop the escalating violence from jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Thousands of people were being killed. Hundreds of thousands were being displaced. the military was losing battles and taking heavy casualties. So when Damiba seized power promising to restore security, a lot of Burkinabés cheered. But Damiba didn't deliver. French troops were still in the country, even though mass protests had demanded their expulsion. Violence continued to get worse. And after just 8 months in power, Damiba was overthrown in September 2022 by his own junior officer, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who accused him of failing to protect the country and being too close to France. Damiba fled to Togo, which borders Burkina Faso to the south, and has been living there ever since. According to Burkina Faso's government, Damiba has spent the past 2 years plotting to retake power. They say he's been behind multiple coup attempts, all of which have failed. In September 2023, just a year after being overthrown, Burkina Faso announced it had stopped a coup attempt scheduled for September 26th. In January 2024, authorities said they disrupted another plot involving active and retired military personnel. In April 2025, yet another attempt was foiled. And now, in January 2026, the government says Damiba tried again, this time with a plan to assassinate Traoré and invite foreign troops to invade. What makes this latest attempt different is the public response. When word leaked out around 1 in the morning on January 4th that something was happening, social media exploded with calls for people to mobilize and protect Traoré. Hundreds, possibly thousands, of people poured into the streets of Ouagadougou in the middle of the night. They gathered at roundabouts and public squares, chanting slogans in support of Traoré, waving Burkinabé flags and declaring themselves a human shield around their president. Videos from that night show chaotic but determined crowds under streetlights, people who genuinely believed their leader was under attack and were willing to risk their lives to defend him. That's not normal. You don't get that kind of spontaneous mass mobilization at 1 in the morning unless people are deeply invested in what their leader represents. And what Traoré represents to many Burkinabés is the first real challenge to French dominance in over 60 years. France controlled Burkina Faso economically and militarily from independence in 1960 until Traoré expelled French troops in 2023. For decades, Burkina Faso used the CFA franc, a currency printed and controlled by France. French companies extracted resources. French troops were stationed in the capital supposedly for security, but really to protect French interests. And when African leaders got too independent, France had ways of making sure they didn't stay in power long. Traoré broke that system. He kicked out French troops. He nationalized foreign-owned mines and demanded that companies operating in Burkina Faso give the government larger stakes and transfer technical skills to Burkinabé workers. He pulled Burkina Faso out of ECOWAS, the economic community of West African states, calling it a puppet of Western interests, and he formed the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger, creating a mutual defense pact between 3 countries that have all rejected French influence and are now exploring alternatives like partnerships with Russia and China. This is why people keep trying to kill him. If Traoré succeeds, if Burkina Faso actually becomes more stable and prosperous under his leadership, if the alliance of Sahel states works, then other African countries are going to start asking why they're still letting France and the West dictate their policies. Every coup attempt against Traoré isn't just about him personally. It's about stopping a model that threatens the entire post-colonial system in West Africa. And Damiba fits perfectly into this story. When Damiba overthrew Traoré in January 2022, he rode a wave of anti-French sentiment. People wanted the French out, but Damiba didn't actually expel them. He kept French troops in the country. He maintained economic ties with France. And when frustration over the continued French presence grew, Traoré led another coup 8 months later and actually followed through on what Damiba had promised but failed to deliver. So when Burkina Faso says Damiba has been plotting from Togo, when they say he's been funded by Ivory Coast, what they're really saying is that pro-Western governments and exiled leaders who benefited from the old system are actively trying to overthrow the leaders who broke away, and the timing makes this accusation more credible. In December 2025, just weeks before the latest assassination attempt, France, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Sierra Leone sent troops into neighboring Benin to support Benin's president after a coup attempt against him. Those foreign troops, some of them hostile to Burkina Faso and the alliance of Sahel states, are still stationed in Benin right now. That means Burkina Faso is surrounded by countries that either host Western troops or maintain close ties with France. Togo, where Damiba was living, is run by the Nassing Bey family, which has been in power since 1967 and has historically been one of France's closest allies in West Africa. So when Burkina Faso accused Togo of harboring a coup plotter, that wasn't a random accusation. That was saying Togo was providing safe haven to someone trying to destabilize a government that has rejected French influence. And Togo's response was remarkable. They could have refused the extradition request. They could have said Damiba was a political refugee who deserved protection. They could have hidden behind diplomatic immunity or jurisdictional arguments. Instead, they arrested him on January 16th, held a hearing at the Lomé Court of Appeal, and handed him over to Burkina Faso on January 17th. That's less than a week from when Burkina Faso made the formal extradition request on January 12th. Why did Togo move so fast? There are a few possible explanations. One is that Burkina Faso provided such strong evidence that Togo had no choice but to comply. If they had recordings of Damiba coordinating the assassination plot, if they had financial records showing money being sent from Ivory Coast, if they had testimony from arrested conspirators, then Togo might have decided that protecting Damiba wasn't worth the diplomatic and legal fallout. Another explanation is that Togo is trying to improve relations with Burkina Faso and the alliance of Sahel states. Togo has traditionally been aligned with France and the West, but the geopolitical landscape in West Africa is shifting, with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger all expelling French troops, nationalizing resources, and building partnerships with Russia and China. Staying rigidly pro-Western might not be the smart play anymore. By extraditing Damiba, Togo might be signaling that they're willing to cooperate with the new power centers in the region. A third possibility is that Togo genuinely believes in regional stability and rule of law, and they saw evidence that Damiba was actively trying to destabilize a neighboring country. Regardless of Togo's motivations for overthrowing Kaboré or for being overthrown by Traoré, if he's plotting assassinations and coups from exile, that's a legitimate criminal matter that crosses borders and threatens the entire region. But let's talk about what Damiba is facing now that he's back in Burkina Faso, because the charges are serious. According to Togo's Ministry of Justice, Damiba is being prosecuted for criminal embezzlement of public funds, illicit enrichment, corruption, money laundering, and incitement to commit crimes. These aren't just coup-related charges. These are accusations that Damiba stole money while he was in power, that he enriched himself illegally, and that he laundered funds through offshore accounts. If proven, these charges could put him in prison for decades. And there's the assassination plot itself. Burkina Faso's government says they have recordings of conspirators discussing plans to neutralize Traoré. If those recordings exist and can be authenticated, and if Damiba's voice or instructions are on them, he could be convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and treason. Burkina Faso recently reinstated the death penalty for crimes including high treason, which means theoretically Damiba could face execution. But Togo made Burkina Faso promise that Damiba would not be subjected to the death penalty as a condition of the extradition. So even if he's convicted of the most serious charges, the worst punishment he should face is life in prison. That's assuming Burkina Faso honors the agreement, which is not guaranteed. Togo also demanded assurances about Damiba's physical integrity, his right to a fair trial, and his dignity during proceedings. But whether those assurances will be respected is an open question, because Burkina Faso is a military dictatorship operating under emergency laws with restricted press freedom and limited judicial independence. And there's another angle to this that's darker. Some analysts and human rights organizations are skeptical that all 23 reported coup attempts against Traoré were real. It's possible that some were genuine plots that were foiled, but it's also possible that Burkina Faso's government is exaggerating threats or even fabricating them to justify authoritarian measures, purge political opponents, and maintain public support through fear. When you're constantly under threat, you can justify suspending elections, cracking down on dissent, and expanding emergency powers. And if people believe you're fighting off foreign-backed coups every few months, they're more likely to tolerate those authoritarian measures. That doesn't mean the January 3rd assassination attempt wasn't real. The fact that Togo extradited Damiba suggests there was at least some credible evidence. But it does mean we should be cautious about accepting every government claim at face value, especially when that government has a vested interest in portraying itself as under constant attack. What's undeniable is that Ibrahim Traoré has enemies, powerful enemies, who want him gone. France has lost billions of dollars in economic influence since Burkina Faso expelled French troops and nationalized resources. Ivory Coast, which still hosts French troops and maintains close ties with Paris, has a direct interest in preventing the alliance of Sahel states from succeeding because if it works, it undermines Ivory Coast's own relationship with the West. And there are military officers inside Burkina Faso who supported Damiba and might still be loyal to him, people who see Traoré as a threat to their positions or who genuinely believe he's leading the country in the wrong direction. So when Burkina Faso says Damiba orchestrated an assassination plot, when thousands of Burkinabés flood the streets at 1 a.m. to defend Traoré, when Togo arrests and extradites a former head of state within days, all of that points to real tension, real threats, and real stakes. This isn't just political drama. This is a fight over who controls Burkina Faso and, by extension, who controls the future of West Africa. Damiba's trial, if it happens and if it's public, will be one of the most watched events in the region. If Burkina Faso presents evidence that he genuinely plotted to kill Traoré, it will vindicate the government's narrative that they're fighting off foreign-backed coups. If the trial looks like a sham, or if the evidence is weak, it will fuel suspicions that this is political persecution, disguised as justice. Either way, Damiba's fate will send a message to every other exiled leader, every coup plotter, and every foreign power thinking about interfering in Burkina Faso. And for Traoré, surviving the 23rd assassination attempt just adds to his legend. Every time someone tries to kill him and fails, it reinforces his image as a leader who can't be stopped, who has the will of the people behind him, and who represents something bigger than himself. Whether that image reflects reality or whether it's carefully cultivated propaganda, it's working. Traoré is arguably the most popular leader in Africa right now among young people and the diaspora. And as long as he keeps surviving these attempts, and as long as people keep mobilizing to defend him, his grip on power will remain strong. But surviving and governing are two different things. Burkina Faso is still in crisis. Over 2 million people have been displaced by jihadist violence. Terrorism is getting worse, not better. The economy is struggling. International aid has dried up because Western donors cut funding after Traoré expelled French troops and postponed elections. And while Traoré's anti-imperialist rhetoric resonates emotionally, it doesn't solve the practical problems of feeding people, providing security, or building infrastructure. The question is whether Traoré can turn his popularity and his survival into actual progress, or whether Burkina Faso will remain stuck in a cycle of coups, violence, and instability. Damiba's extradition closes one chapter of that story, but it opens another. Because now Burkina Faso has to prove it can hold a fair trial, present credible evidence, and deliver justice in a way that doesn't look like revenge. And Traoré has to show that he's more than just a survivor, that he can actually lead the country to the stability and prosperity he's promised. For now, he's still standing. Damiba is in custody, and thousands of Burkinabés are ready to defend their president at a moment's notice. That's where things stand. What happens next will determine whether this was a genuine turning point or just another episode in Burkina Faso's long, turbulent history.